And now, live from Chicago, here's the Black Knight of Talk Radio, James Arthur Jancik.
Whoa, back down.
That seems to be the theme song from our next guest. Alan Watt, a researcher into the causative forces behind major changes in historical development. Born in Scotland, he watched the subtleties of politics and media as they guided the population in the UK, converting into the European amalgamation. It has been warning the North American people for years of how the same process of amalgamation is being carried out. With historical documentation, he shows how cultures are created and altered by those in control, always to lead the people like sheep into the next pasture. Learn the science of religion, creation, domination, rather than simply stating current events and details. Alan attempts to deprogram the listener and the reader of his works. He has authored 3 books, now available, made available CDs, and just completed a DVD of his subjects. He spent a good part of his life in the music industry and has had poetical works published by major university presses, mainly under a pseudonym. Cutting Through the Matrix is his website. And welcome to Feet the Fire, Alan.
It's a pleasure to be on. Yeah.
Yeah, we hear a lot about these secret societies and what have you, and one argument I didn't like from, we'll call them mainstream people, is that if these things were really going on in the background, we would see it on the news, we would see it in newspapers, we would read about it all the time. It'd be biggest stories, biggest headlines. Now, why is that not a good answer?
Because the media, the major media itself, has always been a part of government. It's the media, it's the middle. They peddle the info from the top to you. That's their job. They give you a version of reality which you're supposed to believe in. And you'll find that, why do you think they call most newspapers in all big cities, there's always a sun, there's always a star, etc. You know, these are all the symbols of Freemasonry, or the Mercury, yeah. They're Masonic.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they're all Masonically controlled. And you look at the big empires and empire builders within the newspaper industry and also television industries, and they get knighted. It doesn't matter what country they come from. They go over to Britain for their knighthoods because they've served the system well. Yeah.
And if the system, if the medias are part of the deal, well, of course they're not going to expose it. But then, how do we explain things like Richard Nixon getting nailed?
I don't think he was nailed, I'll tell you. I really don't. So looking back at it all, and even with the way that they play their own people, who are not at the top, they appear to the public to be at the top, but they're put there. Nixon himself, you'd have thought, would have gone and held his head in shame somewhere in some backwoods somewhere, because he'd be ashamed to see the public, and it wasn't until he died that the public were informed that all that time, all those years, he'd been the main envoy to China, the most important job that was coming up for world trade. He was setting up the whole Chinese industry and all the communications between the West and China, for China taking over the industry. So really, he wasn't demoted, he was promoted.
Well, he retired. Yeah, I mean, I would think that if somebody were to do something, they would, go to. If I did something like that, I'd be in prison, and where he got pardoned. And I understand that they take care of their own. It just seems like if it was from Nixon's perspective, he would have just went out of office and went on his merry way. And yet there was some kind of a spanking there. That it seemed. Is it possible that maybe somebody inside the media did something, and the word got out somewhere along the way that they had to do something? So in essence, what happened to him was a way of lessening the blow?
It's very possible. It's very possible. They do take care of their own. There's no doubt about that. But it also seems as though they had them lined up for this job all along. And they do give the public tremendous drama. We talk about all these things that are given to us to talk about, and most of it, is really drama. It's no different from the rags you get at the supermarket, at the checkout counter. It's almost gossip which they write for us to parrot about. That's what keeps the little people occupied, is all the drama. But we never get into the real stories behind the scenes. Never.
Yeah, well, I would clearly say that when you're in a company, you have a golden parachute. If the company goes out of business, rarely do you see the presidents of the companies or the board holders actually becoming poor. I laughed when I saw the documentary on Enron, which had Kevin Lay. Kevin Lay? He was talking about how he lost millions and millions of dollars in this, and he could understand about the people losing their pensions. It just so happens that he had several million left over, but he still could understand the losing them. It's like, well, they should have nothing left over then, especially the way they did that company, the way they divorced like that. There should be nothing left over. There should be no comeback.
Yeah.
I know Nixon was brought in to be a mediator. I think he was doing about the baseball game umpire strike or something, and he came in as a mediator.
Yes.
It's funny how he would not be in shame, if not in prison, at least shamed away.
It's a different set of laws for those.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a different set of laws for those who have risen above a certain rank, and that's part of the key to all of this Masonic business. The lower members of the orders, until they get into the noble order. See, once you become a noble, you cannot be tried by anyone except a jury of your peers. That means fellow nobles. And that never happens. That's why they don't go down the hill to the lower court. They could only be tried by their own peer group. And so that's when, once they're knighted, they're above it all. They're into a new category of regulations and rules, and they have protection. Yeah.
Well, it does seem... Well, I guess what I'm asking on it is that it seems like that, yes, he didn't get what was coming to him, but it seems like there's still a surprise that he got anything.
Yes, and not just anything, but that was a major thing, because this was years, remember, they put him there years before the public got a whiff of NAFTA or GATT, the General Agreement Trade and Tariffs, and the star chambers that would decide where world trade would go, and set up all the business to be set up in China, and all the industry to be transferred from the West. I mean, Nixon was sent out there as the first man really to help set that whole thing up, you know. That was a big job. Yeah, very important.
Maybe maybe Nixon did something in the background. Somebody maybe paid a power play, and someone dropped a dime on him outside to try and keep him involved. So maybe it was an internal struggle that they used a bit of the outside to keep him in line.
It's very possible. I know that I'm sure Kissinger had some run-ins with him. I mean, Kissinger really ran the show, and small as I was, I could tell that the struggle was going on between them. So I wasn't too surprised when he got set up.
So along those same lines, we have Kissinger, we'll say, running the show on that point. People have alleged the current president that really he's not running the show, he's the front man for it. Who would you put in the current administration as being the guy running the show? Or is it somebody farther behind the scenes?
The ones closer to the public view are always the vice presidents. And the higher masonry, you always find number 2 as the main man, never number 1. That's standard. So number 2 is more important. If you understand Pike's numerology, you understand what he's really getting at. And he wrote the rules in his book. So the number 2 man is the boss. So it's always the vice president. And then it's the script writers who write the scripts for the president. You think about it, why even have a president if he's reading someone else's speech? You didn't elect the writers, you see, but somebody picks them, somebody trains them, and these speech writers are coordinated with each other in every country. So you see there's a parallel system set up here, and they're all trained from a central core. They all write the same kind of speeches for every prime minister and president at the same time. So they're coordinated from a central core. They're far more important and they understand psychology of the masses. They know what to say and how to say it, and they write the speeches. And I really think they should get some kind of Oscars and let us see who all these characters are behind the scenes that do the script writing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe that's something that can work out, where you can actually have the best actor and best award.
Yeah, well, we can always give the actors one to the presidents, because all they do is read them, and then give one to the script writers too, a separate one. Yeah.
But in all reality, it's really not a funny thing. It's terrible, because we're having a world run by these people using us as simply cattle, animals, or slaves, or what have you, to do their bidding. They feel that they're better than us. They are treated better than us. They have all these ideas. And where did that come from? Where did this start? How come they wake up one day and decided that we're going to be the elite ones?
I think the techniques and the elites have been here for a long, long time, maybe thousands of years. You just need to read the ancient history to catch how the ancient system in commerce and trade and banking was done. And it hasn't changed. And they understood the mentality of the logic of the masses. Even in ancient times, what's fascinating is to read the philosophers from Greece and others who wrote about the mind and how the mind worked and how the masses would perceive things. Then you follow up through kings and queens backed by the Vatican for centuries with their own advisors, and then you see there's a same technique being used all down through the ages, where they always say the right things and do something else. But it's a science of guiding and controlling mass behavior that really is at play here. And you can go into Machiavelli, John Dee and Francis Bacon and others, who wrote almost books basically intended for kings to read, showing the king how clever and devious this person would be as an advisor. And they wrote books on how to manipulate people. That was a standard science in the Middle Ages, for instance. They also had the British diplomatic corps that was probably the world's best for centuries. And these guys were really spies, in a sense, trained in the chess of life, the chess game of life. And they would go into countries and agitate for revolution and have the current governments overthrown, and then they would dispose of those who started the revolution and bring in the British to protect the chaos, the fallout for the ordinary people. And that's how they took countries over. It was very Machiavellian. They understood how to use peoples to fight for them. And these people would always think they were fighting for themselves and their own peoples, only to find out they'd all been fooled in the end. This was a standard technique. And Marlon Brando did a movie on this technique in the 1960s. It's called Burn, B-U-R-N, and about how the British took over some of the Caribbean islands from the Portuguese, and how they used the blacks to rebel. Then they used the Portuguese, that were third or fourth generation, to rebel at the same time, betrayed the blacks, and eventually betrayed the Portuguese leaders, and then came the British as a brand new empire to take over. This was a standard technique which was used. They used the same technique in India. So these are sciences which are taught in special diplomatic corps on a high level.
Now, we can see that clearly in the Mideast now. We have been told we're going in to get rid of these weapons of mass destruction that were just waiting to destroy us, and, well, there wasn't any. And if there was any, they were so legally poor of a definition of what they were. And it's still like, well, we didn't find him, but he was a bad guy anyway, so we're going to still do it. And I know people are starting to back down off of this, and the numbers are going down and all that, but can we really do anything? One of the things I do in the show is I want to expose truth, both, good and bad. Sometimes the truth is good, and you're relieved by it. Sometimes it's ominous, but you need to deal with it. But what can one do? And we'll go through that throughout the night. But what can one do, for example, on this current thing with Iraq?
To be honest with you, none of the standard things that you could do will work, because we never had a say in the thing in the first place. It was planned years before the event. It wasn't a spontaneous thing to do with 9/11. 9/11 was a must-be that had to happen to enable them to put their plan into motion. And the public have no idea of the realities behind it all. We've all seen all the lies that came out with the weapons of mass distraction and mass imagination, which went nowhere, but it did its job at the time. And what you find is, in history, whenever your boys are over there, you see, it doesn't matter which party you then vote in to change things, they immediately turn around and say, well, we can't pull out now, there'll be chaos. That's been used for dozens and dozens and dozens of times as standard routine. So you could not do it by traditional methods as to stop it. You'll never get the big boys at the top to admit to anything until 50 years after the event. That's also how they work it, when they declassify information. I tell you, the ways you'd have to change it now would be for people and relatives and parents to disown their own sons who join the military. That's what you'd have to do. That's the steps you'd have to go to. Because they depend on the little people at the bottom that do all the complaining to send their own sons and daughters off as cannon fodder, which enriches the big businesses and helps them fill their coffers for the private corporations. And the little guy has nothing at the end of it anyway, you know. So you can't. You have to think outside of the box for a change, because all the complaining in the world is not going to change this.
I think that's a good point. That, I mean, writing your congressman, the only possible way that could help is if you were able to take out your congressman from office. Mm-hmm. And so what I had proposed people do, I mean, maybe the collective of many things would help, would be to actively hold their congressman's feet to the fire about this. If they don't pull them out, I will vote for the next viable candidate, even if I don't like the guy, just to make sure you're out of there, you know, that type of. And that's kind of weak, but that's the only power we have. Not the power of writing a letter, the power of voting someone out of office.
Yeah, what's interesting, I mean, the whole thing of democracy was explained by Plato, what democracy is. And really, if you understand what he's really saying, is that it's a front. It's a front for big power and big business, which can convince the public that they have rights, you see. It's a con game from the beginning. Always ends up with dictatorship as well. That happened thousands of years ago. It happens today. So it's a con game. We don't vote these people, and they're picked long before the public ever see them put on exhibition to vote for. They're selected, they're weaned, they've been given the okay. Politicians, even at the grassroots, who don't belong to family dynasties, to become a politician, you are encouraged to join charitable groups. They're all run by Freemasonry, by the way. That's the induction method. And there's always an older character there who will also be the Grand Master of the local lodge. And it doesn't matter what kind of charitable group you get onto as a board member, you will sit there and you learn the ropes of what to say, what to kiss, and what not to ask. That's how you play politics. And then if he gives you the nod, he'll pull you aside. He'll tell you about a higher board with more contacts, and he'll allow you through, but he'll also advise you to join a Freemasonic organization, be it male or female. And the more you do, the merrier. If you know what not to ask, when you can take the hint, when he's encouraging you to stay off a certain subject, you'll get ahead. So these characters have been vetted and screened for years before the public ever get a chance to vote for them. That's the fact. That's the fact of life.
And if we get to vote at all, it's to pick from, we'll say, two candidates which are already okay.
That's right. It's exactly the same as it was in the Soviet system. They gave you 4 members to choose from. For president, you had Politburo member 1, Politburo member 2, 3, and 4. Which one do you want? They were all vetted by the Politburo. It's the same thing here.
Well, it could be an internal game or challenge for them to get who can get us to vote for them would even make them a better choice, because they got us to vote for them out of the three, so he would be a better choice for the job anyway, because he has a better ability to do the public.
Yeah. Well, Carroll Quigley, Professor Carroll Quigley, that picked a lot of people who are now in your bureaucracy in the federal government, he picked them for Rhodes Scholars. He gave the okay for these guys. Bill Clinton was one of them. And, of course, the Rhodes Scholarship was set up to serve the British Empire for furthering a system worldwide. And he said, it doesn't matter about the lower politicians. They're allowed a certain amount of competition. He says, but the Anglo-American establishment always puts their own men in at the top. That's all they have to do.
All right, well, hold on. We got a good start here. We got a lot to talk about and go through this. Take a break and continue talking with Alan Watt. Cutting Through the Matrix is his website. A lot of information, books, CDs, DVDs, a lot of information there about this. We're only going to barely scratch the surface of what he has to offer. And we will continue live, take your phone calls as well, and emails and chats. 888-863-2722. You would like to ask a question directly. We'll be back live after this break. All right, we are back, and we are live worldwide with Alan Watt, Cutting Through the Matrix, and welcome back, Alan.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
And so, and what I kind of do is I kind of just jump around. So we'll skip around and come back and continue. But what's in my head now is, you see it, and other people are seeing it, and they're talking about it. And people are waking up. We're hopefully not necessarily in alarming numbers as far as you'd say, but why are you allowed to continue doing what you're doing rather than just kind of silence you? Is it like a cat playing with a mouse, just for fun, letting to see how many people get it and so forth, or is there some other, we'll say, force for good kind of thing?
I think that they constantly take the top, and they always have done, is kept their pulse on the people's opinions. Poll taking is a continuous thing. At one time, they used to simply hire thousands of spies, and London had thousands of spies employed in the 1800s, just going around coffee places, tea shops, and bars to listen to the conversations of the public. And they would insert in the newspapers topics of conversation, dramas, and so on, and the public would get involved to see if it was taking, if it was working with them, to create public opinion. But they also listened to see if there was original thought out there at all. And to be honest with you, in this age of mass downloading of entertainment and so on, and the speed of life today, they know that as far as a majority movement goes, it will never happen. They have the minds of most people. And most people go through their life never even coming close to figuring out that the system they're living in is a planned system. It didn't evolve by itself. Every stage was planned, and the major events that would happen through their lifetime that were outside of their control were also planned. Most people never wake up to that. They never figure out that we're in an artificial system which can only spawn more deviancy with every generation. They've known this even with animals since the 1700s. They still do the same test today for psychology students, where they put rats in a cage, a big cage, and it starts off that they had a magic number, and all their social behavior disappears and becomes deviant, and they attack each other. It's the same with us today. They're cramming more and more people into cities. Plato talked about the city being the beehive, which would be used to bring in this new elitist form of control. He called the guardian class were the ones who were the elite. And he said, we shall use the beehive where the people will be put, because once they're in the beehive where nothing is normal, any normalcy can be given to them and constantly changed according to the plans. And sure enough, that's what's happening today. A city cannot even grow its own food. It lives in a completely artificial system, a pariacal system, really, where you have an elite at the top, or at least the ones you see visibly in the public eye, and everyone feeds off the person below right to the very bottom. It's an anti-humane system built on being successful and fit enough to compete. And if you don't fall into the right categories, you end up on the street. And we call this civilization. Civilization was shown in a Masonic movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey, written by Freemasons and put together by Masons. And they show you a lot of their religion in that movie, especially at the beginning. And they believe in evolution. They believe that the first ape man, as they say, had the one who became civilized for progress' sake, killed an opponent for the first time. So taking a life for the first time was the beginning of civilization by using a weapon. And that's what they call progress. Civilization is a brutal mechanism which serves a few.
Well, I saw that movie, and I was moved by it, and it was fascinating, and yet I disagreed with it. And I like the way that you put it that way. It actually, I was grieved when they advanced, quote unquote, by killing the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And but it seemed like that was where they were looking at being, the stronger of it. And then now you put that to the latter part of the movie, and you're drawn to Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
And we're the ones of the apes, we'll say, who are going to rise to that next level. And using that analogy, that next level is to subdue those underneath it.
Oh, sure. Dominate. And you find in this system where most people at one time were taught, when they were bringing in, especially the banking systems, where they could sell off national debt, like the Bank of England, for instance. At one time, people believed that the economic system was there to serve the people. Now, and of course, in higher universities, they teach that the people are here to serve the economic system. And that's the truth of it. That's how it's taught today. That's how it's understood and perceived by those at the top. We are here with a function to serve the system. And this system, with its money and all the rest of it, is just a tool. Money is a means to an end. It's the biggest trick in history, is to get you to accept money until you have a whole world training its youngsters to be busy bees, to be picked up in yellow and black school buses and trained from 8 to 4, which is just like going into a job once you leave school. You've been trained to participate in a system which you had no basically import and creating. So it's an artificial system designed long before us. We are sold into debt before we're born through these borrowing money from international banks. And Jefferson himself said that a generation born into paying off a previous generation's debt were de facto slaves. That hasn't changed. Slavery has always been here. It simply hides itself. It hides its form from sheer brutality to the next level. So we now have a more genteel cover over the name slavery. It's called citizenry now. You're a citizen. And when you're a citizen, you belong to the country. You're owned by the country. The definition of a citizen today in dictionaries is someone born into a system with pre-existing duties to that system. It doesn't mean you're free at all. You cannot be free and be born into it with pre-existing duties to perform. You're owned by the system, and that's why immigration takes such massive boards, is to see who's going to get the right to tax you for the rest of your life, your old boss or your new boss. That's what immigration is all about, and giving you status as a citizen.
Well, we're seeing this stuff, and when we get more into the next hour or two, I want to talk about. I don't happen to think that this is done and over. And I realized that when we figured out Plan A, they're on Plan D, or E or F.
Yes.
So they've, like a chess game, they've already figured out all the moves on the board, and so they're not even worried about it. In fact, if people do kind of surprise them, it might be enjoyable because they, oh, yes, look at that. And then they go with a backup plan. But I say that there is something that can be done that will surprise them. And I go to the movie, I shouldn't say the movie, because I don't like how the movie changed things, but Lord of the Rings has been a very good example for me, reading it over and over again, about how, no matter how big they were and how they always think using their same logic, and then something as illogical as somebody working together and actually losing out on those things they hold dearly was the turn the tides.
I'll tell you though, for every movie you watch, there are two sides of the story. And if you understand, see, the public are meant to view things and identify with the heroes. That's how simply it works. That's how drama has worked in all ages. We emulate that which we see. The man will identify with the hero, the woman with the heroine. And what you don't realize, they're writing an occult story behind it from their point of view as well. Because the Middle Kingdom was mentioned by John Dee and Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon put it in his New Atlantis. And he talked about the people in the valley and people in the Middle Kingdom and the Upper Kingdom. You're talking about a Masonic side of it, which they don't explain to the public. And what they used to win in the end were the dead. It was the shades, the ghosts. Those who were already dead were used to win the battle for them. And then once they had won the battle, the dead disappeared. Their usefulness was gone. They're talking about the people. We always fight the battles for them, thinking we're fighting for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and I could see how you take the movie. I could see that slice of it as you put to that, and that's well said. I was looking at, and I always was bothered about the high blood and low blood, and I want to get into that too, of some aspects of what that might really be. But I was kind of looking at I'm kind of like not looking at that part of it. I'm looking at the part where each one of us plays a part into it that can take down the big, people with all the control and all the power and all the money and all the knowledge, that their arrogance and their greed will blind them to Achilles' heel. And of course, what's after that? I mean, the book ends, and there's no story about how the other people work together and how this one worked with that one. I mean, it's a story, but I'm kind of looking at that aspect where if we could unplug from this matrix and stop feeding it, like in that. In fact, you mentioned about the soldiers. There was a song I heard called "Universal Soldier."
Yeah.
And then the group escaped me, but it was kind of like an Irish folk group. It was but anyway, when he got done with the song, they walked her through it, and the end result is who gets blamed for war is actually the ones pulling the trigger.
Well, ultimately they are, yeah. You see, we are the willing fools. Masonry talks about the willing fools all over and over, including their lower members. You're a willing fool. You believe you go into something for the right reasons. And it's your belief in it that makes your part to serve their system work for them. And young men are picked for old men's wars because young men are pretty stupid. They haven't grown up yet. That's why they picked them at 18. You haven't even learned what life is about yet. They're still playing soldiers one day and then wearing a uniform the next. They're living half in fantasy than reality. And that's why propaganda movies work so easily, because they use, at the top, they use tribal psychology on the young people. It's well understood how tribal psychology works. Every ball game you watch is based on the same thing, and every young boy wants to be the hero that's applauded by his peer group. And so they use these techniques in all these propaganda movies where the enemy can't shoot straight, and you're always the good guy. And, of course, they never go into the politics or who benefits from all this in the movies. All the young guy sees as being a hero and getting the women the status that you'd never get in Civvy Street. and all of this stuff. It's a technique that's exploited by very old men who have access to old sciences.
Yeah, I see that. In fact, I like how you're slicing things. So I want to keep, as Mike goes, I want to keep throwing stuff at you to get your slice of it, because I like how you're slicing it. There's many ways to slice things, and they all have purposes, and you know, and so on. But I like how you're slicing it. I want to get some more. So when I throw the movie The Matrix into that, what's your slicing on that one?
The movie Matrix showed you many sides of this. Once again, one fallout of the Matrix movie, and I've had some calls from young people. One part of what you see in movies is predictive programming, getting you ready through a novel idea. It used to be books, now it's movies, which grabs your imagination and carries you off into another world to come. And the Matrix is almost here. Actually, it is here. But what it showed you in the movie is that you could fight the system from being inside the internet. And I had to tell these, and there's movies out already on top of this, which are encouraging the same thing, that you could fight it by being part of it. And I tell people, look, if you're inside a computer program, if you were hooked up to it, which you can do. They did that in Sweden back in the 70s on prisoners. They put chips in their brains and wired them right to the computer. And that's open, that's acknowledged. If you were inside a computer program, you didn't design the program. There's no free will inside a program that someone else designed. Everything that you could think of has already been thought of inside that program. So predictive programming was unfortunately a side effect of that movie. However, on an allegorical side, it showed you the system really as it is. Yeah.
All right, I want to continue on that because I got some observations of the Matrix. I got the impression that out of unplugging from it, but then they do go back into it and fight the Matrix from within it rather than from outside of it. So that's a very interesting point. But hold on, I tell you what, I'll call you back at the top of the hour because I have a report now for This Week in Free Energy.
Okay.
So we'll give you a call back and continue.
Sure enough.
All right. Alan Watt will be back after a little report from Sterling Allen. We are going through and cutting through even deeper and through this kind of matrix aspect, the idea of they are setting the playing field, and even when we think we're breaking out, we're still playing one of their games.
And now, live from Chicago, here's the Black Knight of Talk Radio, James Arthur Jancik.
Forget about it for today. We'll stick our heads into the sand. Just pretend that all is grand. And hope that everything turns out.
Well, with us tonight is Alan Watt, live from Canada, who is making these points John K. and Steppenwolf made in the 68. But we ended up putting our head in the sand like ostrich because there's nothing we can do, so we might as well just go along with it. But the problem is we're going along right into the slaughter. There is no medium. The people who are running things here seem that they're not content with we'll just use you a little and we'll feed you a little, and like the old slave model, so to speak, of limiting freedoms, limiting creativity, but providing help. It's like now it's like, this is getting boring. Just having these people tag along, and let's just kind of destroy them. It seems like we're going to the point where they're going to see how bad it can get. How much can they manipulate us? How much can they kill us? How much can they get us to kill us ourselves? How far can they go to push that envelope? Now, you think I'm being exaggerating. Well, how about corporations who lay off as many workers as they can, raise the price as high as they can, lower the quality just as much as they can, just to see how far they can push that company. Oh, it goes bankrupt. Oh, we went too far. Well, we'll buy this other company, and we'll do the same thing, and eventually get to see how far you do it. It reminds me of Kramer driving his car to see how close he can get to empty before the car stalls. But it's not really funny, and we're going to be back to Alan to talk more about this in a minute. And back to Alan Watt. Welcome back, Alan.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, yeah.
back to that Matrix thing, you bring up a good point, and I like what you're doing because you're really focused on slicing this right at, the bone and the marrow and the meat, so to speak. It's like right at that edge, and that's good. We need people to have things that they look at, and we can throw stuff at them, and they already have their paradigm shifted this way. And then you can slice it and say, oh, boom, oh, I see that, there it is. And keep doing it, and then all of us can assimilate that point. And then we all have our specialties, we all do it, and we all share one another, and we have a consciousness that we can see what's coming down. It's nice to see you do it. And I never thought about, as much as I love the Matrix, and the answer is to say no, which is what Neo did, he still was in the Matrix. When he said,
yeah, that's right. He was in the Matrix, and in the last movie, remember, he gets to see the Grand Architect who runs all the programs. And the Grand Architect is the Grand Architect of the universe, is the Masonic Grand Architect, as they call him. And he asks Neo a few questions. Now, Neo, remember, is new. And Anderson is son of man. That's what it means from the Greek, Andres. So it's the new son of man. So he's the Jesus character for the new age. And he meets the Grand Architect. The Grand Architect throws a few questions at him. And behind Neo, there's about 50 or 100 screens of television there, which shows Neo going through every possible reaction and answer to the questions. So everything is predicted. Every conclusion you come to is already figured out in the programs by the Grand Architect. Who tells them that there's nothing new that you can think of yourself in this program? You see? So you could not possibly fight it from within. Uh-huh.
I did not see the latter movies. A bunch of people who I talked with about it had mentioned about how the last two deviated from the message in the first one, so I actually didn't watch it.
Mm-hmm.
But giving the account of what you're doing, it seems that way. But I don't agree with that statement. There's, if it is all over and all thought of, then why be here?
What they're showing you is what they're showing you is a predictive programming, because there's movies followed up in different venues along that theme, which have really got the young going, who think they can get into the Matrix and fight it. In other words, literally by using a chip in the head. That's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you got to understand that side of it. On the allegorical side, simply allegory, they were showing you how the system does work. If you understood it already, you could understand the movie. They showed you the legal system run by the programmers of the system. Everyone in the Matrix thought they were normal. They were given a fake life to live. And they saw their fake people that thought were very real, doing jobs. And then they also showed you the Frenchman who was in charge of the underworld. Well, just like this system, the same boys at the top run the overworld, the legal system, and the illegal system. Everything is the duad. Everything is the Hegelian dialectic, where both sides are always owned by the capstone. So there's a lot of allegory of the real system of the world as it is now in the movie. However, the movie takes place inside basically the internet. You plug into it. So it's a different world as well that we're showing you. Two worlds, one allegorical of the present and one that could possibly come. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I see what you're pointing at, which is well taken. But outside the movie, into our real world, we'll say, where there's a lot of things that are comparable allegorically.
Mm-hmm.
Where does our own connection with the higher beings, our souls, God,
yeah,
where does our intuition, our ability to get information from outside of the Matrix? I've had dreams
mm-hmm.
and things pop into my head that were outside. I mean, how does that play into this? Is this a card that they don't believe exists?
No, they know it exists. That's why they gave us religions, and that's why they also would take the beginnings of a religion and then use it against the people. I always say if there was another Jesus Christ or anybody like that, or a Buddha, within 10 years the big boys would control it and give you a different version. So religion's been used as a control mechanism, and we think within the box. If you're brought up with a set type of religion, it's hard to get outside that box to even envisage some kind of creator that's completely different from the one you've been taught, you see. And
I went through that. I actually had a breaking of my paradigm years ago, and I restructured, or allowed to be restructured, following truth as I went along, and it showed a much different paradigm, and actually quite better.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a more independent or personal level, which is outside of the us group. See, religions are meant for the masses. That's why they gave the mass to the masses. And you're taught to think as the mass, and even the born-again Christians think they're going off to heaven like some giant posse all together. It's always a mass thing. And even in the ancient times, pre-Christian, the enlightened ones that always pop up now and then and know that it's nothing of the sort. The light goes on one at a time in different places all over the place, and not as a big group. The mass culture will always go the group way, and they're easily led. That's why they have a shepherd, a good shepherd. And every religion has its good shepherd at the top. A shepherd owns the sheep, you see, and he lives off the sheep, and he feeds off them, and he clothes himself with them. The sheep don't know any better. So anyone who's got a good shepherd should throw it away and bolt for the hills, as fast as they can, till they can think for themselves. But yeah, often thoughts will come from way beyond all of this when you're ready for it, and open up a new vista.
I want to get into some of the spiritual aspects of this in a minute, but you bring up an excellent point that I brought up here, is that there are many people out there who are telling us that we're sheep, and that we should not be sheep, but in reality what they're saying is, don't be sheep following them, be my sheep, you'll be less sheep.
That's right, yeah. That's right, and you fall from the frying pan into the fire. Again, old techniques. That's why the big boys always make sure when they know that religion is dying off, they can sense it if they're polls again, and if they're great at keeping statistics. And when it's dying off, they'll give you something similar, because people, what they look for immediately once they try and leave the old sheep pen, is to look for something with the same kind of rules and familiarity that they can jump into. So they always make sure that there's one with some similarities they can walk into, and they keep doing this. And the people, sure enough, they do walk into it. The whole New Age movement was talked about and planned in the 1800s. The New Age was the Freemasonic magazine's title of the Scottish Rite of Freemasons. They put the magazine out every month back in the 50s, and that was the title of their magazine, The New Age. And they said right in there they would bring in the New Age for a new period, a new era for the world. And sure enough, they have created, over 100-odd years, they've created a whole new religion. And the people who've drifted into it, buying the books off the shelves and being fascinated, it never dawned on them that it was all being created the same as the old religions were created by very clever people with expertise in this area. Nothing happens by chance, as Plato said. As far as culture goes, the elite always give the culture, and they can promote it from the bottom up if they need be, but in reality it is decided and created at the top. Any grassroots movement in religion would be outside of their control and could have incredible consequences to them. So they never allow a grass movement to actually come out of and be and exist for long. Yeah.
Well, once the grass movement starts, they immediately try to hijack it. They can't squelch it, or if they pray, we could use this to our. But here's one of the things I was thinking about, that the best lie to tell would be the lie that has the most amount of truth in it, with the least amount of interference, and using the smallest part at the right part of it to be able to deflect people wide of it would be the best lie. Tell a lot of truth, but boy, has that lie inside there be perfectly placed to really shoot you off. And so my question to you is are they, and if we can wake up, they're in their own way are providing us with information that would allow their own overthrow if we could separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, they are, because they're tremendously legalistic. They must always show the antidote to whatever poison they put out, in the full knowledge that most people will never take it up or even recognize it as such, but technically it's in there somewhere. Heavily camouflaged though it may be, they do give you the antidote, which would take a miracle, to be honest with you. And the antidote, you see, the Old Testament is the rule book of a system. It's not people, all the names you get and so on. It's a rule book of a high, very high occultic system that the high Freemasons understand, not the little guys with the pot bellies and drink beer and all that stuff. The high ones understand it. And the New Testament is an antidote with hidden allegories inside it, which pre-existed Jesus, have been used before down through the ages in other major religions, because they always give you the antidote within each religion, knowing that the people won't take it up. Because to do it, you'd have to be so idealistic in your own nature, and that you'd have to completely alter your way of living, behaving, etc., in the full knowledge that the bulk of the populace around you won't give up all those little things that they hang on to, which keeps the system going. You see, man's inhumanity to man is what feeds this whole system. As I say, it's like every generation breeds another crop of young, foolish men who are easily used for war, the purposes of which they never really understand, often for their whole lives afterwards. They don't realize they're working for private business and corporations at the top. It's nothing to do with the propaganda that's fed into them so easily. So we are, in a sense, our own problem, and yet until we solve those problems, the elite will always use us for their own advantage. They use human nature. They take the drives that we have, the instincts we have, they amplify them until we're neurotic with them, and then they sit back and watch the fallout. We saw that with the sexual revolution, and where that went to. If you take anything, any advertiser will know, if you want to sell any kind of food, you just repeat it over and over and over, especially late at night when people are almost somnambulistic, they're in a hypnotic state. And it sinks in that people will want the food, even if it never dawned on them before in their life till they saw this particular delicacy. It's the same with sex. Any need or drive that you have can be exaggerated beyond a neurotic response until it becomes obsession. And then you watch the fallout, and the fallout is always predictable in advance as well. Then you create chaos in society, then you bring out your solutions, which were formed long ago when you formed the whole plan. These are all techniques that have been used for over thousands of years, and repeated when required. We saw this with the fall of Greece. The same techniques were used. The same with the fall of Rome, as they changed the ages. They had the same thing in ancient Egypt when they finished the line of the Ramesses, or Aries, which is the ram in the astrology and astronomy, in the zodiac. They finished the line there and had havoc in Egypt as it changed the ages to the next age. They had Jesus change over. He's the fish. The fish is a symbol of life. He says, I come to bring you life. And now we're into the age of Aquarius, where he empties out the pool, the gene pool, extent too, where the base material, those who can't come through into the next stage, the new age, must be eliminated according to the esoteric tradition. This is also written into the Hindu religion, which is heavily involved in all of this. So most people go through their lives never understanding any of this, although personally and around them they react to the fallout of it. They suffer from the fallout of it, and they're part of the problem too as they go through it.
If you talk, what you're saying, it fits very well, and I'm wondering what if you took that statement and you're seeing it from a perspective of the people running the show are calling these shots and doing it and so forth. And it is for we'll say a negative reason. I mean, their control reason, whatever. What if that perspective was actually a spin on we'll call it a positive evolution, where the solutions are laid out because, well, how am I saying this now? Where this is a positive evolutionary growth spiritually, but because the dark side, we'll say, will have the same knowledge, or at least very high knowledge of the program, that they will spin the results, pre-spin them, so that when they happen and they fall in line, people go, oh, see, it's just like you said, this is all part of a negative plan. But in reality, it is a positive allowance for people to go through to choose the right way out. Mm-hmm. And the people who are throwing stones inside, I mean, the beings or devils or whatever call it, the negative sides, mm-hmm. are trying to make it look so that the architect, quote unquote, God is the controller is wrong, whereas in reality the people inside mm-hmm. who are trying to derail it are the ones throwing the stones.
Well, that's part of it. I'll tell you why. Because you see, it's also in the traditional religions, even though most people don't know that, because they read it in a different way. They read it the way they're expected or trained to read it. In the ancient religions, and including the Greek, you had different levels of deity. And the levels of deity represented parts of a system. They also had the demiurgos in Greek, where the demiurgos was basically the devil, or the dark side that was in charge of the world of matter. This is the world of matter that we live in, you see. And beyond him, there was much higher levels of more enlightened levels, intelligent levels. But when it came to the world of matter, they had to dominate this world, the dark place. And therefore, in the world of matter, since even Marx goes into this to an extent, Karl Marx, the wars are always about the material. Who's going to own the material? Who gets the big share of the material world? And also with the female, she is mother, which is motra, which is matter. It comes from that. So everything comes from the mother. The male part...
Hold on, we're going to go for this break. If you want to just pick it right up where we left when we come back, that'd be great. So just hold up a minute.
Yeah.
Alan Watt, Cutting Through the Matrix, literally, live on Pete the Driver, right back after this break. You're back live talking with Alan Watt, cuttingthroughthematrix.com, and welcome back, Alan.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, yeah.
So if you could just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, this world, which is matter, is the middle world. That's what they mean by it. It's a place where spirit and matter meet, and where the future of both is decided, and perhaps on an individual level. However, it's a battleground, because the material is always looking for more of the material, and everyone in this world of matter knows what is right, really. If we all did the right things, the whole system would fall apart as far as the slave system goes, and yet we'd have to trust each other to help each other out in the meantime, which we could all do, you know. Mm-hmm. We could all do the right things and stop saying, well, I'm okay, even though the family down the road has just lost their jobs or got kicked out of their home because they can't pay their taxes. We're the only species that actually kicks out of its home because they're poor, or they lost their jobs, or they can't pay. They don't even do that to turtles that carry their homes on their backs. We're the only species that has to pay for your shell. You know, this is an exploitative system, and we all know it. However, when each one is riding high or getting by and affording enough entertainment and all the rest of it, we don't want to see that which is below us, where we might even have been ourselves at one time. We don't want to look there, so we ignore the fallout around us, even in the worst of times. This is a cruel system which doesn't let up even in times of great depressions. The tax man still came round demanding money from you, and it was trying to get water from a stone. No one had any, so you went out your home. So the system carries on even when it's broken, and you at the bottom always suffer, And yet, rather than kick the system out the window, we hang on to it as long as we're okay. It's crazy. And so man's inhumanity to man is bred into the very system from the first day at school when you're taught to compete with each other. It's already there. And you're taught to do that all.
The competition is an excuse to learn, but it's not. It's terrible, I think.
Mm-hmm. And it works on your exploiting the basic fears that we have within the system, which is not fear of being left alone by a tribe, which it used to be. That wouldn't happen in the old tribal system. With money came in the isolation of everyone from everyone else. And you didn't help each other out. Each one was racing ahead, trying to keep up for themselves, not for the whole group. And so all your fears were exploited, and that's your basic fears of loneliness, poverty, ill health, all those things, starvation. They're exploited in this system, and it depends on our corruption, our personal corruption, to keep itself going. It needs that to keep itself going. But we all know what's right and wrong within ourselves, and how the system could be if we all trusted each other. And the film, and not be stupid either. There's always the psychopaths amongst every level here, right down to the bottom. But we all know what's right and what's wrong, and what kind of world there could be without all the exploitation of everyone else. We worship those who have clawed and stabbed their way up to the top and become multi-billionaires. People worship the stars. That's why they give us the stars. Even on your newscast, you get half of Hollywood in the stars. People who are very rich and really haven't done much to get it. And then when you go into the lives of some of them, you find out how they did get up there, you're kind of shocked, and maybe not so shocked. It's a dog-eat-dog system from the top to the bottom, and we worship the guys, the top crooks who can get up there. And that's what they are. That's what they are at the top.
Oh, I'm sitting here, for lack of a better word, I'm saying amen, brother. I mean, it is just crazy. There's no other way to say it. And we are literally willingly doing it. Now, how much do you think metaphysical influence do we have other than simple flashing lights and buttons down here? And do you think that there is a spiritual war in behind the scenes doing the same thing from another dimension, astral dimension, or what have you?
There's a spiritual war, for sure. And rather than classify it, it's much easier to realize what they've given you in the past. In all the major religions, too. And they always give you the little warnings. And it says to fear not those that can crush the body, because they can do that at any time. But fear those who can kill the body and the soul. It's the soul they want to kill. It's that spark that is actually you. It's what they call the psyche. It's you, your whole mind, you as a person, not the body you inhabit. It's your mind, it's everything that is you. They want to destroy that. And if you look at most people today who've come through the last 20, 30 years, they're dead before they're 40 or 50. Physically, mentally, they're dead. They just come in and zonk out in front of televisions. They're in a routine. They're waiting to go to the old folks' home and die off. I mean, they're dead already. The spark of life, the zest has gone out of them. Their soul has been destroyed. And that's a technique, again, which they understand at the top. To retain that spark that is actually you and never to lose it through all the things that come your way is the ultimate goal here. You must retain that. When you do, you are alive. You're really alive.
You're not advocating a mass conscious change in as much as an individual conscious change, which will result in a mass conscious change.
I wouldn't say it will result in a mass. I've never said that the masses would ever survive. It's never happened in previous times. In a sense, you see, every individual is choosing what they want in every age, and where they're going to, or what they're going to do with it in every age. They're deciding for themselves. It's not a mass movement. It never was a mass movement, this world. The masses always go the way of matter, and that's what they choose ultimately.
I guess that's been my problem, and it's not your answer, because, of course, you mentioned about the what you're saying about the mass way. It's like the narrow road versus the wide road, through destruction, etc. It's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my thinking is if people around are simply kind of blindly following this path that's been laid out for destruction in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
and that a person around them in their sphere of influence has a different path, they may be awakened by osmosis, so to speak, to another choice for no other reason other than, oh, well, what's that? I think I'll try that. And then once they're there, see the benefit of it. And I guess that's a big assumption that I'm making, that really...
You'll always find that someone who can grasp what you're saying has already been doing some thinking along that way for themselves. That's what you'll find. Someone who's... And this is true, it's even in Masonry too. They call it the people the profane, and they mean the dead by it. And that's what's behind all religions. When you're picked up from the dead, you stand up. You pick up your bed and walk. It's the occultic stuff written into all religions. It's the same story in all religions, actually. So when you stand up, you become alive. That's what it means. And you're given life. However, you can't make someone do it. They must want to do it for themselves individually. It's always been this way for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So there's truth in there, heavily covered up, of course, for the masses. But you cannot make a person wake up if they don't want to. It's almost a choice to stay where they are in slumber. And some people will tell you they're afraid to wake up because they'll have to change their worldview on every single thing that they ever thought they knew.
Oh, yes. It is literally everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like when you turn from looking toward the left to toward the right, your peripheral views still look at things and so forth and so on. But when you actually wake up to this paradigm shift, you're in another whole world.
Yeah.
And I'm just picking up an analogy here or whatever. But if you look at a TV, and you look at it someplace to educate or learn, when you take this, well, I guess it's the red pill, as the Matrix says, when you wake up on the other side, you see the whole structure of that destroying matter, sending beams into your head, programming yourself, the company behind it trying to maximize their profit and pay people small. I mean, it's just this whole thing. It's like, holy cow, it's just a TV, and it turns out to be this whole system involved that you can see through it.
Absolutely. It's the biggest tool that's ever been used for culture creation and alteration and guidance. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I got a part of the chat room here. Said once you wake up a little, you need someone there who knows the rest of the way out, or at least is a couple of steps ahead of you, so that you're not thinking you're crazy. Because when you start waking up, it's like, wait a minute, everybody is wrong everywhere all time. It's like, wait a minute, I'm the one that's crazy. Can I be the one waking up and everyone else around me is wrong? And so it's good to have someone there who has at least a couple of steps ahead or around, so they can say, yeah, and help you out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. It's true if a person is totally sincere, because there's no such thing as I want to wake up, but I want to hold on to some of that which I believed in before. I always liken it to free falling from an aircraft. You jump out there with or without a parachute, generally without, and you must be willing to do it, not knowing where you're going to fall and how you're going to land. Because if you're truly earnest in wanting the truth, you must be willing to discard everything you ever thought you knew.
Now, that's a very sobering point. In my life, I was in a position where I had no choice but to literally discard everything and start from zero. I mean, it was almost to the point of, do I go to death or insanity? Mm-hmm. Meaning like just turning off whatever that means, or do I allow myself to be rebuilt from the bottom up? And I chose to go with, well, I'm talking to you, so that I didn't choose to die, but I choose to submit the truth, and I believe, and I don't even know why, that there was a truth, there was a benign force literally, that was interested in empowering me to be the best I could be, to learn, to understand, without taking anything from me, and we'll call that God. And by believing in that, I took this step forward. I leaped out of the plane, basically. And the good news is that even though it's as bad as it sounds, once the readjustment starts to, get a little bit, you get some facts together and you start to see things, you won't want to go back. In fact, you can't imagine how you even were there.
Yeah, it's a completely different view that emerges. And this is what has always happened again with individuals, as I say, in every age being a period of time that's called ages, just so we can recognize which one they're talking about for historical use. But that's always happened. It's an individual thing where you're born again, and it was adapted into a Christian religion. It was even pre-Gnostic. It always existed, but it happened by being so sick of the present you and how you related to the world and your own indoctrination. You had to literally die from it. That's what it meant. You died, and you were reborn. You died to the old understandings of everything, and you became reborn, meaning you started afresh with a completely new perception on everything that you looked at. That's what it's always meant in all lands and all ages. Yeah.
And it's almost like there's a small portion of people, whatever that number is, that will actually see this, and that number is kind of written into the equation. And so those who are, we'll say, the dark forces, are going to be like, yeah, well, a few will get away, but we'll get most of them.
Yes, and what they do, they understand this process, and that's why they put so many of the fakes out there to distract the people into cults and into the so-called esoteric groups that have them dancing around in circles and doing all kinds of rituals. So they make sure that you get trapped up in those things for the unwary, and most of the people will actually go that way. Again, because of the training from a previous type of religion, with ritual, with all of that stuff, they'll look for something familiar, and that's why you have these groups with their degrees and all the nonsense. And all it does is put you back in another prison.
Yeah, I was surprised when I got out of the, we'll call it the Judeo-Christian type of religious structure, which has anything to do with Jesus nor God, but the structure.
Yeah.
I went into a kind of a new age structure, like, okay, everything went back to zero. I want to learn, start all over again. I want to learn everything. So I listened to anybody. I mean, I didn't jump in, but I listened.
Yeah.
And I was very, one spiritual teacher after the other, one after the other. I learned a lot of stuff from them, but one thing universally I learned is every single one of them was like, meet your new boss. It's the same as the old boss. You got to do it my way. Here's the rules. Here's the levels. And if you're not, you're going to be shunned and you're going to be made fun of and thrown out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. That's no new age. That's old age. It's the same old story. With just a different painting on it.
That's right. That's right. And they have professionals, trained. I don't know if people realize that MI5 and MI6 in England, London, the British version of the CIA, much older, much wiser. In fact, they created the CIA from the OSS. MI5 and 6 have a complex in England where they train people to go out into the world to create mystery and confusion. And they admitted in declassified documentation a few years ago that they sent Aleister Crowley out, a high Freemason, to set up a new branch of Freemasonry to attract the youth in for the coming New Age. And he started the channeling stuff and all of that, made it popular, made the drugs popular to go along with it, the free sex, all that kind of stuff. And that was created by a division of the British Secret Service. Yeah. They haven't stopped. They haven't stopped, believe you me.
It seems like when you actually put it in those terms, that selling drugs or getting drugs into the inner cities is not that much of a stretch.
Yeah, and make it popular, make the youth want it, tell them that they can channel entities, they can bring in Egyptian gods into them, and and let their imagination just go rampant, and then you have your chaos going. Then you control the chaos. It's much easier to create chaos and then guide the outcome of it, give the solution. And that was all generated years before the sexual liberation, years before the pop revolution and rock revolution, and all the other revolutions. They're real revolutions. A revolution is a turning around. That's what to revolve means. And they use revolutions. Most of them are bloodless, but they change the culture. And they're planned way ahead of time. And they set Crowley out there in the 1920s to set up that whole structure of the OTO, the Order Templi Orientis, another branch of Freemasonry which they created to bring the youth in. And you find most of them who end up in the rock bands and the groups all belong to the OTO that attracted them in. It's all through their music, you know.
Well, when you put all that together, I bet there's a lot of people out there who are listening who are, it's gelling together. I mean, they're starting to come together. They're going, wow, you know, they're getting little goosebumps and whatever kind of internal type of a I call it a resonance. When I hear truth, there's a deep inside, profound resonance, and I really can't even go farther than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I actually go check it out, because I learned, I just didn't believe anything, and I just didn't even believe me. I went and checked it out until I had more confidence in this resonance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you do when someone says, you know, they're waking up now and they're seeing this, they're seeing the television turn into this thing I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeing that the structures in their life, the church, even though the people in the church may themselves be nice people, they're still part of this. What do you tell them? It's like the gospel when you go to a Baptist church and you know, they take you and they give you these lists and they follow this stuff. Well, in your case, you're still going to have to tell them something, even though you don't want to make them disciples.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you say to somebody who's just waking up in this?
You have to feed them little bits. You can't feed them a lot at once because you overwhelm them with what you know. It's impossible. It's like trying to get 1,000 volts into a 1.5 volt battery.
Yeah. What would be like the first step you would, you know, in a general sense? What would you recommend to somebody?
You help them, really, rather than impart information, you help them to start thinking. Because up until then, they haven't done much thinking for themselves. There's a process to thinking, truly, which they haven't even begun. Because even from kindergarten right through the schooling system, they've had indoctrination, but they haven't been taught how to think logically or critically. At one time, critical thinking and logic were taught in schools. That's been completely eradicated now. And now it's all groupthink and consensus for democracy, and where individualism is frowned upon and shunned, in fact, and punished. So they haven't, especially those who are maybe 30 and under, they don't know how to think for themselves. When they do try and think for themselves, they'll explain whatever they're talking about through a series of movies that they've watched, and they don't realize that's where every idea and conclusion that they're now coming to has been given to them is from the movies. You see, they've never ever thought originally for themselves.
Well, I think that's a good point, is that when people are waking up and thinking, it's like somebody never realizing they could stand up. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a little weak at times, and they're going to have to learn how to think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really is becoming born again in the most literal sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also glad to hear you not, and I mentioned this in our little group of people that I call them program observers, to kick things around here.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things is that we're noticing you're not looking to have followers. You're not trying to set yourself up to be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
You are out there kind of walking around, as you know, from my perspective, sharing your wisdom, but you're not looking to, you know what I'm saying? You're not looking to make the followers of Ellen Watt.
That's right. Yeah, and also, I mean, to be honest with you, I'd rather teach a very few in a lifetime than masses of people. And those who teach masses of people are always used ultimately and abused, and because their ego grows so huge. And so they fall for traps laid in their way, and then their followers go around in circles as well, and then leave and go off to another group. That's not how truth works. Truth works, as I say, on an individual basis. And whereas in the past I've taught individuals, a very select few, I won't take anybody on, or for money either, for that matter. So I have to know that the qualities and the genuineness has to be there, and the ability to understand and learn has to be there, because you put an incredible amount of energy yourself into a person in more ways than simply talking to them. There's more to it than all of that. You give a lot of yourself bringing a person up into life, you know. So it can be exhausting, yeah.
Oh, yes. And in my case, not that I'm any kind of messiah, but I've got these things, and I've woken up along the way, and I've went to people, two mistakes I've made. One, I went to people thinking that if I, look at this, they would go, oh, wow, you know, which is almost never. And secondly, it was even like my responsibility to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I felt responsible to share with people. And I learned that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is for me to wake up and me to get the stuff together. And then as I go through life, I will connect with people along the way and share information, like I'm doing with the show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having you on, I have other people on, we share the information. I'm not attached to them making sure that they know what I'm saying, or do they know what you're saying. It's just, here's we got stuff. You know, some of it's incompatible. Some guests are incompatible with other principles. And it's up to the people out there to listen to it, and it fits in their head, yeah, okay. It's not up to me to make them or feel responsible. When I became not responsible, I was like, the weight that came off my shoulder was incredible.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You unload on a tremendous burden when you really do break through. You dump such a heavy burden of indoctrination, and you feel free for the first time. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how we're taking phrases here that are literally direct quotes from Jesus, and those same phrases are said in a church, and the differences between the two.
Yeah.
I mean, we're literally talking freedom here, and they're literally talking slavery.
They are talking slavery because as a group who are authorized to exist by the system they serve, you'll find that the huge churches are part of the whole culture creation structure, and they stand up for this system no matter how inhumane it is. It's incredible how they can even pretend they're following one type of religion while they promote and practice the other. They allow their tax money to go to make bombs to slaughter people all over the planet, and all this kind of thing. They allow their tax money to be used for aborting children all over the place, and used for research and development to ultimately clone us into perfect types of workers. They applaud this system and stand up for it. It's amazing. And yet they're such hypocrites, because they should be on the streets promoting the opposite of all of that. You know. But they're not. And they wear their suits and ties, the Masonic uniform too, so, and they don't even understand they're in Masonic organizations. Yeah.
Well, I could keep going on and on here. We're coming to the end. I want to make sure you give time that people can get a hold of you in any way that you want to be put out there, so they can learn and draw from all the items that you have, especially on your website.
Yeah, they can look into cuttingthroughthematrix.com, and there's other mirror sites going up all the time, and all I have really is the lack of time. But they can get lots of shows for free there, and they can buy the few things that I have up there, which helps to keep the whole thing going so far. And
in fact, I had a person who wrote in here and was heralding the fact that I have free archives compared to others like Jeff Rentz who have a pay, and I said, well, I can assure you that while the archives may be free, it is not free to make them.
It's That's right.
And you rely on people who see the value of it, who will either buy the products or donate money or what have you, because it takes an incredible amount of time and energy to do something.
Yep.
And the drive is not to be famous or rich. The drive is to share the information.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's all. In fact, this is the only. There's nothing else to do for me in this world except do what I'm doing, because nothing else can compare to it. There's nothing else as urgent either. There's nothing out there.
Well, I agree. That's what I'm encouraged to hear you talk on these things. Keep on keeping on, and it underlines the necessity of getting information out there for people to. And I love it because I'm a listener as well as the host in the show. I learn. In fact, a long time ago, someone gave me a statement that says, if you want to learn, teach.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, I don't really have to teach in as much as I just put the whole thing together, and I learn a lot, and I'm able to ask the questions, and we have the open lines and forums for people to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important for that. So,
yeah, absolutely.
It's cuttingthroughthematrix.com. That's really the best way to do it, and then from there, you can have a bunch of other items.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to end up here with my music's going to come in and cut us off, but I appreciate you being here and talking about these items, and that I'd like to actually have you back on it. In fact, I want to get in touch with you about some other things, and just I wish you well and keep it on.
I'll do as best I can. Yeah.
Well, and you know what? And that's all we can do, and it's rarely. That whole idea of somebody doing the best they can do is become foreign now. It's doing the least you can do, get the most out of it with the least amount of quality or experience. And
yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, God bless you.
And same for you. Yeah.
Thanks. We'll be talking.
Thanks for having me on.
Alan Watt, Cutting Through the Matrix. It is. I tell you, it's good to hear that stuff. It's real and it's the deal. And if you don't listen and let the stuff come in, you're just doomed to just kind of just wander around. And I actually had people who don't want to know, they don't want to learn the stuff, and they want to wander around. And of course, in that one movie, Matrix, it showed a guy like that. But it's wake-up time, and we're all waking up. Let's all do it together.